everybody grieves in a different way at a different time. And there are going to be days that Jon is having a terrible day, and you're doing maybe you're a little bit stronger that day, and you lift him up that day. And there are going to be days that you're so low that down looks up, and so Jon comes and lifts you up just a little bit. And that's a great thing, that you grieve in different days. And the length and breadth of your pain and suffering is not associated with the length and breadth of your love for the person that you lost. I mean, some people will grieve terribly for 6 months and others for a year. It doesn't mean that the one that grieved for a year loved twice as much as the one that grieved deeply for 6 months. People heal differently. They express their grief in different ways. There's a point where you'll say, it's time for us to celebrate Hersh. It's time for us to use his life for these other hostages. And it may be hostages that are still taken today. It may be some that are taken in the Congo a year from now. But I know you two, and you two are going to use that young man's life. He will not be forgotten, and his life will be used. I know it because I've talked to you. I know that you will. And it may start today, it may start a year from now, but I know that this young man will never be forgotten.
I think that's all so important for us to hear. And it's something that we are actually already manifesting, which is within our grief and our suffering and our decision that we gotta still live life, we're also embracing the mission that we think would be the best way to honor Hersh and the other 5 when it was found. And that is, if out of our grief, we could play any small role in saving the remaining 101, that is what Hersh would want. So our pleas that we had for 350 days that didn't work for us, we're continuing on this path. We're trying to give a wake-up call to decision makers around the world, to the leaders of the 23 nationalities still represented among the hostage population, and say to those people, it is not too late. It is for ours, but there are others, and they must be saved immediately.
Well, you know, Rachel, you mentioned Auschwitz, and one of the most meaningful books I've ever read, and I've probably given away hundreds of copies, is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. You know, he says in that book that they could control everything for the captives in Auschwitz. They controlled whether you could stand, whether you could sit, whether you lived, whether you died, whether you could eat, whether you could sleep. But he said they couldn't control one thing. They couldn't control the attitude that I took about it inside. They couldn't control what I said to myself inside. They couldn't control my inner reality about it. And that is so profound. And I choose to believe that was true of Hersh. I see it being manifested in the two of you now, because that's how terrorists work. They terrorize a few to terrorize thousands, millions, and they can't hold dominion over you and Jon, Rachel. They can't do that unless you allow them to. And you're not allowing them to. You didn't allow them to when you and I, the three of us, sat down in Israel and we talked about it then. They're not controlling it now as we talk about it, and you're inspiring the families of those whose loved ones are still held captive. You're offering hope and inspiration to them now. You're defeating terrorists right now by showing you haven't broken us. We're not quitting. We're still here. And you took our son away, but you didn't take away our hope. You didn't take away our will to continue to fight against you. So you are using it as we sit here and talk right now. You are embodying what Viktor Frankl wrote about in Man's Search for Meaning.
You know, Dr. Phil, we experienced so many unusual things on this journey. One of them is we had a rare opportunity at a practice run of this kind of grief, which is to say, on October 7th at night, I was called to the local police station to give DNA samples. And I went and I came home, and Rachel and I first had the conversation in our bedroom of, we may have now lost our son. He might never come home. And we talked about it and we cried about it. And we said that night, if this is the case, we are going to grieve and we are going to live life and move on. And then 36 hours later, we got the good news that he was taken captive, and we began our journey to save his life, only to end up at the same result 330 days later. So we've twice had the chance to make a decision that we were going to do what we're talking about right here in this conversation.
Well, and I want to just be clear. We don't mean move on and,
Right.
this is behind us, like then that,
Right.
has, it was Thanksgiving and now we've moved on. But it's just going to become something that's incorporated, that we carry with us always. And we will deal with it in different ways as time goes on. But we really do want to be facing forward. And, in the Bible, there is a famous saying of, I'm setting before you today the choice of life and death, and I am telling you to choose life. And we are deciding to take that prescriptive, and we are choosing life. And it will be difficult for a very long time to process this really largest of challenges that a parent can swallow, but we're going to choose life, and we're going to bring Hersh's beautiful memory with us, and his light will always be shining on us, and it will be very challenging for a very long time, but we are choosing life.